My son Gary was arrested in 2002 in March for hacking into Pentagon and NASA computers when he was searching for information on UFOs and free energy. But David Burrowes, I met him in Parliament at the same time as we met Baroness Browning, and they were very helpful as regard to Gary having the appropriate medicals, because you can only fight in human rights ground. And we met David, the very first press conference he came along to, and he was very articulate, put himself across very well, and it was very clear right from the beginning this was a man who could communicate well with people, and he genuinely did care. It wasn't a sort of front or something for publicity. He never sought it. He did much of it in private. He is a genuinely good man who cares about his constituents, and he has worked for asylum seekers to stop them being deported just as hard as he worked for Gary, and yet that was done not in the limelight. So to say that it was done because it's a high profile case is not the case, because David Burrowes works for all of his constituents regardless of whether no one knows or the media knows. It makes no difference. He works just as hard.
And am I right in thinking that David actually threatened to resign?
Yes, he did. David went to David Cameron. David Burrowes went to David Cameron. He spoke to Theresa May. He's spoken to everyone. And he, as I said, went to the American ambassador, and he said that if the extradition went ahead, he would resign, because he just thought it was so wrong and it should not happen. And he did threaten to resign. Fortunately, he didn't have to, but David, right up until the night before, thought he was going to have to, because he phoned us and he thought it wasn't looking very good, and he still said he would resign. We did manage to save Gary's life, but there was a few very close calls. And Professor Simon Baron-Cohen, a psychologist who's an expert in Asperger's, which is a form of autism, he said Gary absolutely would take his own life. We also had Dr. Jan Vermeulen, who is a Home Office approved psychiatrist, who had worked in Broadmoor for years, who had spoken to people who seemed fine and 2 minutes later had taken their own lives. He had vast experience of it, and he said Gary would absolutely take his own life. It wasn't if or maybe, it was an absolute. And I'm saying all this from a neutral perspective, because my views are very socialist in many ways, looking after the underdog, looking after people who don't have anything, but also I don't hate the rich. So I think the attitude of hating the poor and hating the rich is just not for me at all. We are all the same people. We are a chain of people, and it is a good within us, regardless of your political colours. So I'm saying this from a neutral perspective, not from tying tying to any political colours. But David Burrowes is a man that I respect. He is a genuinely good man who is principled and really did help us hugely to save Gary's life. We really felt that everybody was engaging, and we know that David Cameron went over to Camp David when he tried to get the extradition, to speak with the president, to come to an agreement to have a fairer extradition treaty so that we would have equal rights to America. So he did work on that. Then nothing happened, and a year later there was another press conference in England this time, and President Obama came over for a state visit and going to Buckingham Palace and so on. And again Tom Bradley came up and he said, "And what are you going to do about Gary McKinnon?" And David Cameron spoke up for Gary at length and mentioned his family as well and his mother as well. And President Obama then said that it was a British decision that he would accept and respect. And we thought, that's it, we're home and dry. People congratulated us in the streets, went into the bank, we were congratulated. But then nothing happened, because what happened is it was put in Theresa May's hands, and she, very rightly, because to make sure there was no comebacks, which there could have been a backlash against her from other parties, she went over every bit of the evidence in depth, and she realised that he could not go, and she said she refused to extradite him, which was the happiest day of our lives. It meant that 10 years of, and people said, were you bitter? No, we weren't bitter. We were relieved. We felt as though we'd won the lottery of life. It was incredible, and I'll never, huge respect to Theresa May, David Cameron and David Burrowes, I will never forget what they did for Gary.